And Professor Deresh, congratulations once again on that national order that you received last week. Members of the Rectorate, our Pro-Vice-Chancellors, our Deans, our heads of schools, divisions, and other university structures, members of our Student Representative Council, the Stellenbosch community and our business leaders, members of the Stellenbosch community at large, guests that are joining us via live stream from our campuses and from around the world, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is a pleasure to welcome you this evening to Stellenbosch University and, as has been mentioned, to the 8th annual Africa Day lecture. Now, Africa Day invites us not only to reflect on where we have come from as a continent, but to take responsibility for where we are going to as a continent. We meet at a time when the stakes are high. The stakes are really high for Africa at this point in time. Across the continent, the questions before us are not abstract. The questions are about opportunity. The questions are about justice, about dignity, and the ability of institutions like universities to make a meaningful difference in the lives of Africans. Ultimately, universities will not be judged by what we say about ourselves. We will be judged by what we contribute. We will be judged by whether we are trusted to help solve real problems. We will be judged by whether we translate knowledge into impact. And we will be judged by whether we remain relevant in the societies that we serve. This is why platforms like the Africa Day lecture matter. Since its inception, this lecture series has created space for conversations that are both intellectually rigorous and publicly meaningful. It reminds us that scholarship does not exist in isolation. It must engage, it must challenge, and it must ultimately serve society. At Stellenbosch University, we speak about being a research-intensive university, rooted in Africa, with global reach. Some of you may have seen that over the last week, I have been visiting a few countries in Africa, and the message has been very consistent about the role that Stellenbosch University wants to play in the advancement of the African continent. In fact, through two, I'm going to call it visits and tours that I've done across the African continent in the last 12 months, there's been a tagline that's come out that speaks to what we want to be as a university. In Africa, with Africa, for Africa. But that positioning only matters if it is lived. It means building partnerships across the continent, not as an act of outreach, but as an act of collaboration. It means recognizing that Africa is not a problem to be solved, but a place of knowledge, innovation, and leadership. And it means confronting a reality we often return to. That the greatest challenge facing our continent is not a lack of potential, but the gap between potential and implementation. Bridging that gap is where universities on the continent must play their role. This is what makes this evening's lecture so timely. Dr. Deresh Ramjugernath's work challenges us to think deeply about history, justice, and the structures that continue to shape our present. The lecture, Zinziani Mvubu, the Hippo's Calf, engages with questions of reparations, sovereignty, and the meaning of justice across generations. These are not easy conversations. They require intellectual honesty and moral clarity, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But if universities are serious about their role in society, these are exactly the conversations we must be willing to host and to engage in. Now, we're equally privileged to have Professor Phumla Malekazela with us this evening. Her work has shown us that confronting the past is not only about memory, it is about what we do with that memory. And the dialogue that follows this lecture is therefore not an add-on. It is central to the purpose of this evening, to engage, to reflect, and to listen. As we gather here tonight, we do so as part of a broader community, one that extends beyond this room and across the continent. Africa Day reminds us that the future of this continent will not be determined elsewhere. It will be shaped here on the African continent by the choices we make, by the ideas we pursue, and by the institutions that we build. And if we are to meet that responsibility, then universities must not only generate knowledge, they must ensure that it really matters. It is therefore my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Sophia Olivia Sanan, a lecturer and research fellow at ABREC, to officially welcome and introduce our guest speaker. Thank you very much.